Good morning to everyone. Welcome to the Rutland webinar, Third-Party Certification Explained. We're concerned about the life safety at every fire door and looking at this question, what actually is third-party certification, and looking at explaining how that contributes to life safety. So warm welcome. And we'd just like to introduce our panel today. We've got guest speakers. I'll just introduce. So we've got with me Rhonda Hughes, who's our researcher and historian. Good morning, Rhonda.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so I work here at Rutland and we are all about enhancing life safety at every fire door. So today I'm just going to bring in a little bit of history about third-party certification that hopefully you'll all be interested in. And yeah, good.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Neil.
Nice, good. And Neil Ashdown, good morning.
Good morning, Neil. Good to be here again.
Good to see you again. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, so my name is Neil. I do fire door inspections, fire door consultancy, so helping clients with compliance, building owners with safety of their fire doors, legal compliance, and those that install fire doors or work on fire doors, also with compliance to make sure everything's right.
Very good. Good to have you on. Thanks for your time. And we have Danny White of Fire Door Compliance. Morning, Danny.
Good morning. And for those who have been following the series, unfortunately, I still haven't made it as a professional footballer, so I'm stuck in the fire door industry.
You haven't been recruited by Wimbledon yet?
Not yet, but, you know, never say never.
Well, yeah, please introduce yourself, Danny.
Yeah, I'm a fire door inspector, set up a company about 6 years ago, just because I thought there were gaps in the market when it came into fire doors and certification. And it's just grown ever since. So we do technical specifications, reviews, help procurement, study tender documents, evaluations, that type of thing. So anything to make the world a better place and fire doors compliant.
Excellent. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks.
Next we have Neil Harrison. Good morning, Neil.
Morning, Neil. You okay?
Yeah, good. Good to see you again. Thanks for giving up I understand you're on holiday today. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, good. Could you introduce yourself to those, if there's anyone that doesn't know you?
My name's Neil Harrison. I work for a company called Falcon Panel Products. And Falcon are one of the major door core system houses and distributors for the UK and in other parts of the world as well.
Great. Thanks for all you do. And we'll hear from a door manufacturer's perspective on third-party certification shortly. And we have last but not least, we have Simon Beer. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Neil.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Good.
We'd like to hear your bio. Tell us about you.
So we're a UKAS accredited certification body. We specialise in doors, windows, glass and fire resistant products. More recently, we've been doing a lot with fire resistant products, so that tends to be what we focus on.
Great, brilliant. Thanks for your time today.
Okay.
We'll hopefully you'll explain what UCAS is as we go through the presentation. Well, great panel, Rhonda. What do you have to share with us today?
Yeah, so I did a bit of research into third-party certification. Just made a quick timeline on third-party certification. So
that's a good idea.
It just sets it out quite nicely. And the first date that I found was the British Calibration Service was formed. So that was in 1966, so quite a few years ago, or for a young person like me, that is. And then 1981, the NATLAS was set up. So that's the National Testing Laboratory Accreditation Scheme. And then 1985, that merged with BCS, so the British Calibration Service, and formed the National Measurement Accreditation. And then 1995 is when UCAS, so what we all know nowadays, was formed, which again was another merge of the National Measurement Accreditation and then the National Accreditation Council bodies. So that was 1995. And then
that links us with today then, when we're looking at UCAS accredited certification.
Absolutely, and that's good, Neil, yeah. And then 1997 is when this stands to be improved, but what I found was the first accredited for third-party certificate was awarded to a door manufacturer. So that was 1997. Yeah. Yeah,
unless anyone's got one older than that.
Yeah, exactly. Do say if you have.
Please let Rhonda know.
Yeah, would be very interesting. So yeah, that was just a couple of years later after UCAS was set up.
Great.
So
yeah, well, that's brilliant. Thank you, Rhonda, for sharing that. Any news as well on the fire door industry?
Yeah, have got some interesting news.
It's good. I mean, it's nothing wrong with the history, but
yeah, it's good to know what's going on, isn't it? Yeah, no, absolutely. So one interesting thing that's happened is there's been a new MP appointed for the role of so the Minister for Housing, and that is Stuart Andrew. He's replacing Christopher Pincher. I think you said, Neil, does it happen quite a lot, the role?
They have changed a bit in the last couple of years. Yeah, I suppose that's general in government departments, but
switch and change. And then the other thing that was quite interesting, the building safety bill has reached the committee stage of the House of Lords. So, and they think that they're hoping for royal assent in May. So this year.
That's the timeline.
That's good, yeah. So at the minute, it's just going through lots of reviews and they're digging into the detail of it and checking everything. So yeah,
good.
That was just what I brought to the table today.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Keep it up. Keep the research going.
Sure will.
So just on the question and answers, thanks for that, Rhonda. There's a chat, those that aren't familiar, there's a Q&A chat facility, and any questions, or if you were a door manufacturer that was third-party UCAS accredited, certificated before 1997, let us know, things like that, or any questions about third-party certification. We'd be glad to hear your questions throughout the webinar. We're very interested to hear from the boots on the ground. Neil Ashdown, if you could share with us your fire door assessor, fire door inspection experiences, if you've got anything to share.
Yes, of course. So what's been happening in the world of fire door inspections is we're getting two sorts of inquiry. There's the building operator that has existing fire doors in an existing building and needs to comply with the fire safety order. So fire door inspection checks in terms of compliance with the legal requirements, but also, more interestingly, certainly since Grenfell Tower, more and more inquiries from fire door installers, so companies involved in new build with fire door installation or a refit with fire door installation. And that is good because it's at the front end, so we can help with compliance along the way to make sure the finished article is actually a compliant fire door. Which brings me to the presentation slides that I have. There aren't too many, don't worry.
When you say front end, Neil, is that you mean before the project starts?
Yes.
They're talking to you.
Yeah, so what tends to happen first is that the door leaf, the fire door leaf, will be specified. So we make sure that's suitable in terms of the right door for the job and durability. And then, as the slides will show shortly, the compliance side of it, to make sure if it's a certificated fire door, that all the items that are installed with it are suitable for that particular fire door leaf. That's what we mean by compliance.
Yeah, good.
So we've got a few slides here, and if any of the panel want to ask any questions along the way, that's absolutely fine. So we've got a building here being refurbished, the Brown Ball building, And as you can see from the section through the building there at the stairwells, there's a fire door on each floor, and it's an FD60S fire door, providing separation for that stairwell because it's a protected route of escape. So the important thing is the fire door installer, existing client of ours, wanted to make sure that at handover, everything would be compliant. So it's not just about inspecting the fire doors as they're installed and after they've been finished. It's about making sure all the components to make up the fire door assemblies are correct. So these are fire door assemblies, not fire door sets. So an assembly is where the fire door installer selects all the components to make up the fire door, whereas a fire door set is where the door set manufacturer takes that away from them. Now, fire door assemblies are still probably, I think, the most common method of installing fire doors these days. And there are certification schemes that certify products, one product being the fire door leaf, others being the hardware that help make up the fire door assembly. So it's essential that a fire door installer doesn't assume that every fire rated component is suitable for that particular door. Fire door leaves have different core constructions, some of them, so therefore that has an impact on which components, which hardware and ironmongery can be fitted to them. So before you buy the component, it's going to be checked that it's the right one for the door leaf. So there, a list of components on the left-hand side, the leaf, the frame, the hinges, etc. And on the right-hand side, the certification document for the fire door leaf will also describe how the door should be installed. So we can have compliance to a third-party certificated fire door in terms of the components and also the installation. So the installer is a building company carrying out the refurbishment of the building. They already have their own trusted suppliers they've worked with many years. There'd be the fire door leaf manufacturer or supplier, and they would commonly supply the frame also. There would be the ironmongery supplier who has a range of hinges, door closers, etc. that they normally supply. In this instance, we need to speak to all of those to make sure that the end product in terms of fire door assembly installed would be completely compliant to the third party certification for the door leaf being the main component of the fire door assembly. So we need information about the door leaf, information from the fire door fabricator who was cutting the vision panel and supplying a finished door, and all the hardware suppliers. So we have the hinges. We looked at the certification for the door, and the hinges need to be of a certain type and of certain dimensions. The same with the lock set, and the same or similar with the self-closer. I'll come to that. So the hinges, we spoke to the supplier to find out the dimensions for the hinges. The same with the lock set, we need the dimensions. Now, the interesting thing was the suppliers weren't aware that to be compliant with the door leaf, we'd need that information. They were very good at supplying the declaration of performance, the fact that it was CE marked, but not so much on the dimensions. And that is a thing that is necessary to look at in terms of making sure that they're suitable for the chosen door leaf. So that was done. We made sure that was all correct. So the correct hinge and other items were correct. When it came to the door closer, the issue was that the third-party certification company for the door leaf insisted that the door closer was also certificated, but to the same certification scheme, not a different one. Even though there are UKAS schemes or UKAS accredited third-party schemes, they wanted to make sure that it was part of that same scheme. I'm not exactly sure why that was, and that's something we can discuss today. And the same with intumescent seals. They also need to be of the same scheme, but helpfully on that one, the certification document for the door leaf actually showed a range of seals, intumescent fire seals, that could be suitable, and also showed how they should be installed. So at the end of it, the door was able to be compliant because we checked all the certification documents for the door leaf and made sure that we were specifying the correct hardware to retain the certification. So what we have at the end of it is all the right components for a third-party certificated fire door, from the frame through the hinges, closer, seals, etc.
Just out of interest, Neil, how long did that actually take to like check all that?
A week, because the thing about it is, it doesn't take long to actually look at the documents, but it takes a while for the suppliers to come back with information.
Yeah,
so
supply
that's
it,
the important thing. It may have probably been a day's work or half a day's work, but that becomes 4, 5, 6 days because we're waiting for information to come back. And hopefully, as we get, if this is the new world for fire doors, if we get used to this, then obviously we can be ready for it, and times can come down. But it
Hello,
needs
Neil. I've just got a quick question for you. That you know, as I'm an advocate of door sets, and this is the alternative to door sets, a door assembly. Now, you've done a very, very thorough process to ensure that the certification is adhered to. How many doors do you think this level of due diligence is being done?
At the moment, very few.
Yeah.
We've been involved with projects at the front end because the installers wanted to make sure doors are compliant. That may be because they've engaged our services before and we've found issues before handover. And those issues have stemmed from a lack of understanding about certification requirements and about compliance with compatibility for the door leaf. So it's something that's, I believe, very new, and there will be installers out there as we speak today still not even aware of it, and
Neil.
lots of non-compliance fire doors out there for that reason. Simon.
Hi, Neil. I'm just wondering whether you think the typical fire door installer would be able to understand all of this. So if they're assembling components and putting them together on site, is this something that's relatively easy to do, or does it need a specialist like yourself to have a look at it?
It is easy to do because the information is out there, but only if you are used to understanding the documentation, that being the certification documents.
Because you've got a bit of a leg up.
Sorry, Neil.
I just thinking from Simon's question, you've got a bit of a leg up. The fact that you used to be a door manufacturer at one point. I mean, you've had a lot of experience with how to read certificates over the years.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen lots and lots of certificates for components and doors, so I understand them. And if you were to pick up one from cold without having had the experience, I think it would be quite a challenge. I think they could be written better. And I think as we go forward, if they are consulted, these certificates, then I think they will be improved and written in a better format.
That's good. Thanks for asking that question, Danny.
That's all right.
Have you got any other things you can share with us? Insights?
It's always been a concern of mine. And you go down to your local builder's merchant, you buy a door blank, it says fire door, and it's got a certificate label attached to it. But yet,
just on the leaf.
Yeah. But then everything you've just spoken about, checking and doing this and ensuring that the products are correct, that's never ever done. But yet it's a false sense of security because the end user is thinking, yeah, but on the top of my door it says it's a certified product.
Yeah.
And I think one of the areas that, I think we need to discuss this more at the end. But is this too complicated? Is it too complex? And what's the point?
Well, what I can say about that, Danny, is that I understand, I'm not sure about this, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I understand that if you are a door leaf manufacturer supplying under a third-party scheme, that you should supply installation instructions for that door leaf. And those instructions should tell you how to install them and not to cut a foot off the bottom, for example.
Yeah.
I can see Neil Harrison nodding there.
It does make sense to supply a full factory hung door set though, because even, I mean, my experience with this is even things like the width of the intumescent strip is wrong when it's put on site. So if you're going to gather various components together and make a factory hung, well, not a factory hung, a fully finished door set based on buying lots of different components, possibly from a merchant that doesn't understand how the things interact together. You've introduced an element of risk, whereas you could have just bought a completely finished door set and had that installed on site.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Could we discuss this at the?
Yes,
Sorry, yeah.
Later. My apologies.
No, I was just wondering. It's probably a good panel discussion, that question Danny's asked. Could we, Neil? Could you just give us a bit more perspective from a door manufacturer's point of view on UKAS accredited third-party certification?
Yeah, we just so I'm from a manufacturing background. However, I now work for Falcon, who distribute the system. So we deal with all the product development on the door set systems that we cascade out. We often receive calls from manufacturers and specifiers referring to legality, asking whether a particular arrangement is legal, but there is no mandatory requirement for fire resistance or fire products to be third-party certified. It's a completely voluntary system, and people and companies who subscribe to third-party certification put themselves through the additional scrutiny of the scheme requirements, be it testing, audits, all in order to provide confidence to their customers, end users and specifiers.
That's their choice.
Yeah, it is completely voluntary. But at the same time, as being voluntary, it's not a mandatory requirement. It's the same way as it's not being a mandatory requirement, it's also not automatically accepted as being compliant against the building regulations. Building authorities, responsible persons and the regulators are completely within their rights to dig deeper into the evidence they're presented with, and they may want to see additional documentation that forms the scope of certification presented. So you may very well be issued with a certificate, or you may very well see a label like what Danny was saying on the door assembly, but there is a requirement to dig deeper into that to ensure that the certification you're being presented with is suitable for the product that's being placed on the market and for the building.
Interesting.
Like the overall idea for fire door third-party certification is a good one. It's about having fire safety products that perform, and I don't think anyone's can dispute that. The idea behind it is great.
Fully agree with that. It's almost like due diligence. You can say we've gone above and beyond.
Yeah. At the same time, it isn't an insurance policy. It's not it's not in some way having an independent body underwriting you. If you place something on the market and then something, and there's a fire and that product doesn't perform, the manufacturer isn't able to turn around and say, not us, pal, we're certified, you're going to have to speak to the certification body. It just doesn't work like that.
Right. Yeah.
Everyone along the chain is responsible for their part for that door set or door assembly to actually perform. It's also worth noting that the MHCLG investigation into timber fire doors took, I think it was 25 individual door manufacturers to task by subjecting their door sets to dual orientation fire testing to the current standard. There was a mixture of those manufacturers. There was a mixture of both certified and non-certified companies, and the certified companies were subscribed to a number of different schemes. Every single test in that investigation passed, which to me demonstrates that from this relatively wide sample, that the timber door industry is in better shape than sometimes is perceived.
Interesting.
Each of the schemes are different, and we in our company we have to subscribe to a number of them because of who our customers subscribe to, and it is.
So you've got
depending on.
You got like the same door leaf is under maybe 2 or 3 different certification schemes depending on the requirement for the market.
Yeah, and sometimes each individual, when you're talking about individual components like a door leaf, each individual door leaf might even be part, have a couple of different systems within the same scheme. So for example, you may have a different system or recipe book for a front entrance door set, which may also require, security or durability requirements. then that same door leaf might be used when it's set in a, you know, in an educational setting, for example. There's a different recipe for each of those two systems.
That's one question we get asked. I wanted to put to you is why is it different? Third-party certification schemes have different rules.
Yeah. Well,
I don't want to like hijack your.
No. It's because that, you know, the individual, they're all individual entities. They all have to be UKAS accredited, but they have to generate their own rules because they have to stand by the rule set that they make. So, you know, on the whole, there tends to be two types of certification scheme. This isn't hard and fast rules, but one tends to go. Some go down a component-led route.
Yep.
And some go down more of a door set or a system-led route.
Yep.
So just really briefly, on a basic level, component-led scheme would certify individual components. So from a door assembly perspective, there'd be a hinge, a door leaf, frame, closer, glass, and those individual components will have gone through some form of fire test, both the pre-certification and usually some surveillance testing as well as a minimum, to justify the fire rating or the annotation of those individual components. There is other things involved as well: quality control, auditing, sampling. Yeah,
like FPC. They go and check out the factories.
I think the important thing is that, you know, these individual components show consistency. They have to be the same or perform the same along their lifetime.
That's
and basically, under those schemes, those components can be brought together. So you can have a leaf from one manufacturer, you can have a leaf, a hinge, a closer. It might not necessarily have been tested together in the initial setup, but the idea is those individual components, when brought together, will perform. And this is, you know, coming back on what Danny was saying earlier about the people bringing those together. There is an option for the people who bring those components together to be certified themselves.
Yeah.
And they will understand the labelling requirements and things like that to for when they place that door assembly on the market. Now, whether the guy that, you know, the guy or the business that brings those components together is subjected to testing or not, that's dependent on the scheme.
Right.
And whether they, you know, the level of auditing or scrutiny they get, that depends on the scheme rules. It's always important to check the scheme rules that you see.
Yeah. I can see that from just hearing Neil and Danny speaking from an inspector's point of view. A door manufacturer might only have to know the scheme rules of one scheme, because if that's the scheme they're with, whereas an inspector really just, what I'm hearing today or learning is that an inspector really needs to know and understand and learn about every scheme because they don't know what they're going to come across.
Yeah. I think,
Neil, I'm going to ask you a really, really simple and stupid question.
Go on.
So am I right in thinking that under certain third-party certification fire door manufacturing schemes, you don't actually have to burn the door?
No, right. Each scheme will be based on primary test evidence. That's just how it is. Yeah. And it will be both pre-certification testing and surveillance testing. Now, whether it's a component or a door set system, and when I say system, I don't just mean something from Systems House. I mean, you know, an individual manufacturer may have their own system, create their own system scope document, and put that onto their certification. So each of those documents will be based on a test or some testing of some sort. Depending on the scheme rules, whoever brings them together to form an assembly, whether it's on a fabricator arrangement, whether you're a modifier or an assembler, or however that's brought about, whether they are subject to fire testing themselves, that's a matter for the individual scheme.
Yeah.
So some do, some don't. There is always a level of scrutiny, whether it's actual testing or not, depends on the type of certificate and the type of scheme rules. And
I think this is one of the issues that you know, I'm always coming across, whereby the client wants the door manufacturers to have physically gone out and burnt the door so they can learn a lot about it. But yet you've got certification schemes potentially which say you don't actually have to do that. And I think that's where you've got issues within the industry about what the client wants and what the certification bodies wants. And I think they're at opposite ends of the scale at the moment.
Well, I think I think the certification companies are approachable. You can always speak to the guys in the certification in the approved bodies and say, hi, I would just like to understand the relationship between this company and your scheme. What are they subjected to? They should be transparent and be able to tell you what they're subjected to. And I wouldn't find that to be a problem anywhere. The other thing that I found as well is a lot of people who aren't necessarily, forced to carry out surveillance testing or pre-certification testing in the particular schemes. Sometimes they've done it anyway.
Yeah.
In much the same way as the under certificate. If you've only done testing for auditing purposes, one of the main, Danny, one of the main questions we get asked is, can you provide me a test report for this fabricator?
Yeah.
In certain instances, they may very well have been subjected to sampling and testing under that scheme multiple times over their existence. However, the scheme rules dictate that they don't necessarily get a test report.
Yeah.
Because it isn't that type of test. It will be still a test to that standard and all that sort of thing. But in order, because it's not a development test, it's just a routine, it's an audit test. It's not really necessary for a report to be put into circulation.
Yeah.
So I think it is important to speak to the certification body to get an understanding of what that person or what that business has been put through.
That's incredibly helpful. Is there anything else from a door manufacturer's perspective, Neil, before we?
Well, just touching more on the sort of the door set led scheme. We've gone more into the component led schemes, more on the door set / system schemes. They work differently. So where you've got the component schemes, each individual component will have some form of identification on it, and then you can get situations where you're on site, you've got multiple labels, and you have to decipher that, much the same as what Neil was talking about before. Door set or system led schemes tends to be one certificate and then a number of scope documents that can go onto that certificate. In the most part, they can't be mixed. They're not interchangeable. You haven't really got a requirement most of the time that components have to be subjected to the same scheme or anything like that. But I think one of the benefits of that is you've got your one recipe book. Yeah. And you follow that, and there shouldn't be deviation from it. What that does by the time you get to the end of it as well is the manufacturer or the person placing it on the market, it's one identification mark, or it's an identification mark that goes on there that says this is the door set or this is the door assembly and this is what we placed on there, and everything on this is all within that scope document, whether it's a field of application or global assessment or
and that identification, it's not always a label. Sometimes it's like a
you get plugs, labels. A lot of people use it. This is outside of third-party certification, but chips and RFID tags and things like that. It's quite usual to find that as well as the labeling required by the certification body, that there may be another label there which has got a QR code or a tag or something like that, so that you can trace back and actually see a bit more detail about what that
who manufactured it, who installed it.
The main thing on the traceability is really, really important. Yeah. Especially for these guys who are inspectors, they need to be able to go on site and have a look at the door and get as much information as possible relatively quickly.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Neil, and I'm sure that's helped a lot of the door manufacturers on the call today. Appreciate that, sharing your knowledge. We're now going to hear on what it's like to be a UKAS accredited certification body and how UKAS operates. Over to you, Simon. we're looking forward to your explaining third-party certification.
I'll do my best. So, actually, we've talked a lot about UCAS. The point of UCAS, if you have a certification body going out and checking manufacturers, installers, maintainers, and inspectors, you want something to make sure that they're credible to do that. So UCAS is the body that gives the credibility to the certification bodies.
What does it actually stand for? Sorry,
it's the United Kingdom Accreditation Service.
Oh yeah, can see it there.
So it's a Crown approved body. Interestingly, so you want the credibility from the certification bodies for the certification bodies. That's what people like NHBC and Secured by Design ask for it to be recognised by them.
Right.
And also BIS and DLUC also insist on UCAS accredited third-party certification for them to accept it. It's also it's not a requirement in the building regulations, but the building regulations recommend UCAS accredited third-party certification. So it sets a standard across all the different certification bodies. We have to comply with a standard that's 17065, which is the one for product certification.
Okay.
That also includes services, so installation and maintenance, because you're doing something to the product.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy process to get through. We have some very, very rigorous checks on our procedures, on our impartiality. They're very hot on impartiality and independence, and we have to have a committee that we need to consult with on a regular basis so that they can overrule what we do. If we don't go along with the impartiality committee, they can then report us to UCAS and we can lose our accreditation.
Yeah. So we spoke about a new housing minister, for example, in the government. Are UCAS the go-between the government and the industry? Are they like, where do they fit with the government?
So if the government was to put in a certification scheme, they would ask UCAS to accredit it.
Yeah.
They've done that there's competent persons schemes, so Fencer and Assure and the like for windows and doors. They're approved by the, I want to say the MHCLG because they've changed their name again, but by DLUC. So they're approved by the government to operate. But what they'll do is they'll say, in order for you to operate, you've got to get UCAS accreditation first. Yep.
Good.
So they'll also look at the certification scheme that we put together as well. So it's not just the certification company, the individual scheme would be covered too. So if we go on to the next slide, you can go onto website, the UCAS accreditation website, and then so that's their homepage. If you then go to the next slide, you can see there's a search. So you can check the organisation and see if they're covered by accreditation. So there's our organisation.
Yeah.
But you also want to go a little bit deeper than that because you should be able to see, I can't remember where I've got that, on the scope of accreditation. So a couple of slides on. That's it. So you want to see whether the certification body has got their scope of accreditation on there.
Yeah, and that'll vary in body to body.
Yeah, could we go back one slide actually, please, James? So this is our schedule of accreditation. So we're listed on UCAS's website. Then you can see our actual scope, and it will show which schemes they've given us accreditation for. It's also not a one-off thing where we get the accreditation and it stays. We have to go through regular audit visits, and they come out and shadow us while we're looking at customers as well. And that happens on an ongoing basis. And it's quite a number of days per year that we have to do to maintain that.
Right.
Okay. So when you're checking a company in the same way that you want to check that the certification body is covered by accreditation and that the actual scheme you're looking for is covered by accreditation, you want to do the same thing with a company. So the certification body will have a scope that they they give to the company that they're certified, that shows what's covered by the certification scheme.
Interesting.
Down the bottom of that scope, that's a sample. It's not a real one, but it links it back to the certification body's website, so you can see whether they are certified. Most certification bodies will do a certificate check. It also has a statement in there to say that the certification body isn't taking liability for the customer's products. So Neil mentioned this before. It's not supposed to be a guarantee. What you do is you go out and you do what's called a sampling audit. So you check a sample of the manufacturer or the installer or whatever the certified company's products or services, and you're looking for compliance. You then go back and do ongoing visits. But you can't, you've got a trade-off between providing something credible and providing something that is going to be taken up on a voluntary basis because it's not mandatory.
Yeah.
So you can't expect the certification body to be in the person's factory every day of the year, checking every product that comes out.
Just wouldn't be commercially viable.
No, nobody would take the scheme up because it would cost an absolute fortune.
Yeah.
And therefore it becomes unviable. Therefore it won't get specified either.
Yeah. And also doing a sampling visit, it's quite intrusive on a door manufacturer. Like it needs someone to be with the auditor to answer questions, to maybe take doors off the production line, and so they're always stretched. As we know, we need more fire doors out there to save lives. So
so that's another thing as well, is that schemes will often have audit testing involved, and there's a cost to that. Fire tests are not cheap.
No.
So every certain number of years, you will take a product off the production line and retest it.
Yeah.
Ironically, the frequency for fire testing is normally about 3 to 5 years.
Right.
If you then look at security, products will be taken off the production line every year.
Is that every 12 months?
Yeah. That's because Secure by Design, who specify this scheme, have driven that and put that into their specification, which means that the certification body can do that. Yeah. Because you won't sell a product unless it's gone through that route. But at the moment, that's not the way it is for fire. It's still voluntary.
Simon, do you think the industry at the moment has the capacity to fire test every year?
Well, the lead time on fire testing is not particularly short at the moment anyway. So
what we're looking at the moment, Neil, about if you booked a test at most labs, you'd probably be looking around October off.
Yeah. Some have got a shorter lead time than others, but if you then took all the certified companies and made them test 3 times as much effectively, I think you would have a capacity problem.
Simon, can you talk also about services that are third-party certificated rather than just products?
Yeah, so services would tend to have an inspection on site, and then you'd look at the procedures that the company works to as well. So typically you'll have a couple of visits per year. You go out and you look at things like training and competence, how they record installations, how they purchase stuff. And so you'll look at their operating procedures, and then you'll look at the actual products that they install or maintain or service on site on a regular basis.
Good.
So I've skipped around and completely lost where I was on my slides, but I think I've covered most of it. This was the last one. When you there's a few things to look at for third-party certification. One is, if you're buying a certified door set, don't buy something and then don't go for something right up at the top of the chain and then break the chain, because then you've lost the certification on it.
That traceability.
Yeah, so you want a fully finished factory hung door set, in the case of fire doors, that's been installed under certification, maintained under certification and inspected under certification.
Yeah,
If
fully agree.
even if you have it installed under certification and somebody comes along and just adjusts it afterwards, that could take it out of, that could ruin the performance on it. So it's important that the whole lot's done and under the certification chain. To do that, you want your specification clause to be unambiguous. And actually,
Right.
if you're choosing a certification scheme, you'll probably find the certification bodies will talk to you about that and have a look at your specification for you.
How much can you advise under UCAS rules?
We're not allowed to give consultancy,
Right.
so we can't tell. For example,
Does that come down from UCAS? I mean, that's part of their requirement.
it's part of 17065.
Yeah, get you.
So what we can do is to point out what our scheme rules are, and in fact, under 17065, you can if the rules are requested, you are obliged to give them out. You can't keep that to yourself.
Yeah, okay.
So I wouldn't see any issue with presenting how those scheme rules, how we would monitor those scheme rules. And in fact, you could phone up UCAS and ask them. Actually, I'm not going to suggest you do that. If we were to phone up UCAS and say, we could have a discussion on how they would interpret the rules, but they wouldn't tell us how we could actually achieve those, and it'd be the same with us. So we can't tell you how to manufacture, install, or anything that we're certifying you for. And actually, we shouldn't, because if we went into one manufacturer and saw how they're doing it, and then go into another manufacturer and see how they're doing it, and they ask us a question about how to achieve their compliance with their product. If we tell them something, it will be based on the experience at another factory, and we've effectively breached their IP by doing it. So it's really important that we don't do that, even just from a point of
just credibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I can see that's very, very good, and that breeds trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the other hand, you should be able to contact your certification body and ask for clarification around what their rules are. Yeah,
that helps. Sorry, I keep hijacking your presentation.
No, actually, the only other thing I was going to say is it's worth, because certification is not a guarantee, it's worth asking for additional inspections afterwards. So somebody like these fire doors inspectors that we have on this webinar, it's worth getting somebody to check it, because even with the sampling visits that you're doing, you're only going out a couple of times a year. You can't guarantee that it's going to be right. Having somebody doing an independent check as well isn't a bad idea.
That's good. And often it comes down to, when something does go wrong, what more could they have done?
Yeah,
that question it's good to ask ourselves.
So I think with certification is not mandatory, but you are required under the building regulations to be competent to do the work.
Yeah.
And the building regulations, they set out, you have some requirements that you have to meet that are a few pages, and then you've got the rest of the regulations. You've got the guidance document that goes with it to tell you how the government's interpretation is of how you could meet that.
Yeah.
If you decide, and one of the things they say is UCAS accredited third-party certification is a good idea, and that's a way of meeting the competence requirement. If you decide to do something different to what's in the building regulations, it should at least be equivalent to what they've put in their guidance notes.
Yeah.
So the difficulty, if you decide not to go through this sort of route, is actually demonstrating how you've met that. If
you diverge from it. Yeah. That's helpful. At this point, we could maybe just get a bit of interaction with the attendees and maybe have a poll, just a vote on what do the attendees feel as to, in their opinion, what are you comfortable with? Only factory assembled door sets to be certificated, fire rated frames and door leaves sold separately and certified, or are we happy with both?
Neil, when you talk about door sets, are you talking about the all essential components, the true European definition of door sets? So face closures, for example, must be supplied every component.
Yeah, good point. So it's leaving the factory as a life-saving device. It doesn't need anything adding to it.
I've just suddenly thought of something, and this is one for the panel as well. The problem I think there is to do with the certification potentially giving misleading information or providing a false sense of security. And the reason I say that, and it's sort of somewhat based on what Neil Ashdown was talking about earlier, we have a product, it's got a label on it, the end client thinks, yes, it's a certified door set. They haven't done the due diligence, which Neil was talking about. So in effect, they haven't got what they think they've got. And I think that could lead to problems further down the line, because the clients are looking to protect themselves. They think they've got a certified door set and they haven't.
Interesting. What do you say on that false sense of security?
If it's done properly, it's okay. But
a good question for a panel discussion.
I think so.
Well, there's the results while we're thinking around Danny's question. So interesting, 61% in their opinion would prefer fire doors going out of a factory as a full ready assembled life-saving device, what we sometimes refer to them as.
Just on that poll, Neil, it'd be interesting to know the sector that voted. If they're all door manufacturers, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, we have got a very good mix from a global audience today. So apologize to our global attendees that we're talking a lot about UK legislation. But yeah, it's a very interesting result there. So back to your question, Danny.
I think it's misleading, personally, because at least with a factory hung door set, pre-assembled, everything like that, it's then the responsibility of the manufacturer to get it right. Now, if we go down to our builders merchants and buy various component parts, and we don't read the installation instructions and we don't read how it's going to be put together properly, we've still got that label sitting on the top of the door potentially, which is misleading, and potentially, do we know these components are going to work together?
Mm-hmm.
It is a good point, but at the same time, there is a market for that. I realise there's obviously more control when it is a system door set led certification type. But are we suggesting that you shouldn't be able to buy an FD30 door from a builder's merchant because you've done a loft conversion in your home? Because there is a requirement on the, let's say my house. I'm going to put a loft conversion in. I'm required to protect the escape route, so I'm just going to go and get some FD30 doors to protect the escape route down there. It's not going to get inspected. It's unlikely that you're going to come to my house to do an inspection, and as the property owner, I'd be required to make sure that the competent person puts it in and that I understand what I'm doing there. It's the same kind of thing as I can't go and prat around with my gas meter, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the responsibility should be more on the builder's merchant selling you the products, and this is what you've got. And by the way, you should be using X, Y, and Z with it.
Yeah.
For me, it makes sense not to mark the product in a way that looks as if it's covered by certification if it's only sold as a component.
We've got an interesting country we live in, which we can't really do too much about, that like one of my colleagues has got goes across to Sweden quite a bit, and when he's across there, they have standard door sizes. So if you ordered a door that's not, is it what are the standard sizes? 925, and they've got standard size doors, and if you order it outside of that, they look at you absolutely gone out. Like it happens quite a lot across Europe. Whereas in the UK, we've got all these like fancy castles and cottages and little doors that you have to bend down to get into, and doors, even like changing, say in a hospital ward, might be or an office block, changing a store cupboard, a large store cupboard into an office and changing the door. So they take out the 44 mil rebated frame because the door's got opening the other way, and then put in a door liner. It suddenly enlarges the door leaf beyond a standard size. So there's lots of reasons where assessment and third-party certification needs to play into all that. But I don't know who actually, whether it's architects that's creating the need for third-party certification in the UK, or whether, choosing weird and wonderful doors, or is it cost cutting because it's cheaper to put in a door liner than another 44 mil frame. I'm only putting this to the panel as just.
Well, I think when you talk about cost, the perception is it's cheap, but potentially in the long run, it's more expensive.
Yeah.
Because I buy my cheap assembly, I put it together, but I put it together incorrectly and I install it incorrectly.
Yeah.
So therefore, I now have to go back and replace that. And I thought, well, I've learned my lesson. I'll go back and use a pre-hung door set, which is probably more expensive. So therefore, my pre-hung door set, which was originally perceived to be expensive, is now the cheaper option because I've had to add on the costs of the door assembly as well.
Yeah.
So it's a false economy and a false sense of security.
Yeah.
Danny, what I'd say there is, though, that there will always be a market for the door leaf because there could be a damage issue with a door leaf. Therefore, there's no need to go out and buy a new door set. You're just taking like for like. And also, we also maintain fire doors and repair them. Are we saying that can't be certificated? It is at the moment.
Yeah.
But if you do buy a door leaf, then the finished door assembly should be compliant all as one thing. So what you should be looking at is whether the frame is acceptable, whether it's been installed properly in line with the door manufacturer's instructions and the lot, even down to where the fixings are. If it's been installed properly and you're taking a leaf out and replacing it with exactly the same specification leaf, and you check the frame and the way it was installed, then you're probably okay. But that's not usually what I see happening. It's door leaves that have been in for decades, and they don't want to pull the frame back out, so they don't actually do any checks. They just put a fire door into it. And often when they've been installed as well, they haven't been properly fire stopped back to the brickwork. So
the perimeter seal.
Yeah.
One thing
lack
which
of awareness, isn't it? Because that's been around for a long time.
I think what Danny just touched on there about more instructions and education coming out with the products would be a massive help. Does that help at all, Danny?
Yeah, I think it does to a point, but it doesn't. The problem is the education, and I think, and still, so people don't really fully understand certification. Hence why I think it was a really good topic, and lots of areas covered. So it's going to give people food to think about.
Yeah, and think deeper on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm very much an advocate of pre or fully tested and certified factory hung door sets, because that's coming out of the factory in proper conditions, as opposed to trying to cobble something together on site by somebody who may not have the installation instructions. But I'm talking about for general refurbishments. When it comes to your own DIY jobs, and that's potentially slightly different. But I think it's back to the builders merchants being more upfront and having more information about instead of just saying, well, it's, you know, £100 will take your money, have a bit more due diligence and say, well, you know, make sure they've got a copy of the installation instructions with it and say, you know, you must read this and do things like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well,
we talked about boilers and installation earlier, and there's a bit of an anomaly with fire doors. If you fit a boiler, it's got to be done, or if you work on it, it's got to be done by a gas safe registered installer. If you fit an external door or window, that's got to be done either under a competent person scheme or local authority building control have to come out and inspect it. And that's just on residential dwellings as well. If you go into a commercial building and change a fire resistant door set, there's a recommendation that they're covered by certification, but no requirement for it.
Right.
And given that that's the case, and you can buy individual door leaves and components, it makes absolute sense to make sure that's done under third-party certification, because there's no legal requirement for it to be inspected. So effectively, anyone can do it.
Yeah.
So if you want the confidence, that's what you'd be looking at.
Yeah.
But it's worth noting, though, Simon, that also we're talking about a scheme here where the installer, maintainer is audited twice a year. In that time, he installs a lot of fire doors. There is an element of marking your own homework with that. I see it, you know, it can be abused. And as an inspector, I see too many fire doors installed incorrectly, even when they are third party.
We need to keep moving on. We've got, but just I wanted to say there on audits, they're random audits. You don't know which ones are going to be visited.
It would depend on the scheme. It tends not to be completely random.
Right. Yeah.
You would normally know that
this one is going to be visited. Yeah. Very good.
I think when it comes to the installation and the fixing of it, people should be putting in another level of due diligence. So even though you've got third-party installers, there should be a way of checking to make sure that they're being done properly by some sort of accredited competent person. Because then it's just making sure that the industry is getting it right, you know, through the manufacturing process. Now we've done the installation, that's right. And now let's move on to maintaining these doors properly. And it, you know, always amazes me that, you know, people install, you know, an active fire alarm system, which has cost £20,000. That's maintained on a regular basis.
Yeah.
They put in £100,000 worth of fire doors, by far their bigger asset, and they're just left.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the economical sense in that?
Yeah, never knew you were an accountant, financial advisor.
Back up to football.
Yeah, you know, when you said advocate earlier, I thought you were going to say you were an advert, an advert for Wimbledon. Right,
it's the best place in Southwest London.
This is our own opinions here, not legal advice.
We don't give advice, just to be clear.
Yeah. Thank you very much, all. Thank you to the attendees. Fantastic numbers still on. Really appreciate your time and hope you've learned from this explanation of third-party certification today. And we look forward to our next event. Thank you to the panel and have a good day.